DC here. Hi, guys and gals. It wasn't running at first, so I was wondering what was going on. I hope you're all well. It is Sunday, early afternoon, just coming up to 2. And we ate a bit later, and I'm having my coffee now. It's Costa Rican coffee, which was bought at Aldi's and is actually very good. Yeah, and people often ask me what's the difference between coffee bought at Aldi's and high-end espressos, which we also have. And first thing is the price. It's about oh my goodness, it's probably 3 to 4 times more expensive than espresso one. Are they better? Frankly, a lot. Some of them are, and some actually at Aldi's are really very good. But the quality varies. I find more probably at Aldi's than it does over at Nespresso. But you know, that's the whole thing. So we have some Nespressos which actually we tend to keep more for weekends or when we have guests. I mean, I will drink. Oh, let me see. Probably 4 or 5 coffees in a day, and they're not all this size. I will drink like what they call the lungo, which is still not an Americano, which was called over here in Europe very often, which is the I was going to say the standard American filter cup size or something. This might be closer to the Italian coffee. The Italian coffee maker cups, something like that. Yeah. I was chatting with Mrs. DC earlier. She made, this time I didn't do the cooking this weekend. She made a pizza, and it was kind of like the deep pan style, closer to the pizzas that we would make in Canada. And she made the dough and so on. And I was telling her, it's funny how cues can be. The fact that this pizza was closer to the type of pizzas. Oh, there's some wasps. The pizza was closer to this type that I knew as a younger person living in Canada, brought up like, when did I find out about pizza the first time? And it's like I say, there's all these cues that came up, and then I realized that it brought me to a whole series of memories. My dad was he started out, basically he started out, I guess, as a welder, a farmer who became a welder. Worked on the at first he worked on probably the CN, Canadian National or Canadian Pacific train lines, and they were welding, when they were putting the rails down. Then from that, he more or less became a pretty good mechanic. He worked as an auto mechanic for a while, and then worked at the ski center, and then finally ended up in a textile mill. That would be another story on its own, because I also worked there as a student. But so my dad was, moved up in a little ways, I guess. I mean, I kind of like to say moved up in a little way, because there wasn't much to move up in over there. You were a mechanic at the department, or there was the general maintenance department, which kind of like was the firemen, when the designed or assigned mechanic couldn't do things on the department problems, they would call in the maintenance department. So and my dad finally ended up being the small head. I like to say the foreman of the maintenance department. And when he was at that, he did have different responsibilities. It was like I say, in today's world, it would probably be seen as a small job, but for him, it was big. And for us in the family, it was something. Hey, my dad was a boss. And And because of that, uh, the textile plant sometimes had people come from abroad to help with the particularities of some of the machines that they had, some of the apparatus for the textile plant. I mean, I can't remember which ones in particular. And I do remember the first time there was a man that came from Italy. And no, he was not the one that talked to us about pizza, but he came over, and my dad was a very sociable person. He would invite them over to our place, usually for, maybe might be for a beer if they were staying for longer. Come over. We had a pool, an outdoor pool, and he might say, "Well, come over," or maybe even for a barbecue. So, but there was this Italian guy, and our neighbors, because half of the village worked at that textile plant, and the other half worked at the ski center. So my neighbor, our neighbor, who was a department mechanic, and my dad went to meet this Italian guy, and then my dad came back and says, "I've learned all about Italian wine." It was funny because, I mean, wine when we were kids was a big story because we didn't have any. There was no place to buy wine. You had to go into another village, this would be a totally other vlog in itself, but you just couldn't buy wine. You had to go to specialty shops, and even there, they would ask you what you wanted, and they would give you the wine. But anyway, if it was in a restaurant at a hotel, at the time there was 2 hotels in town, and he was at this hotel, and the man asked if they had wine, and it happened to be that they did, and it was a Valpolicella, Folinari Valpolicella. I still remember that because my dad came back and said, "Oh, now I know all about Italian wine." It was kind of amusing because I can just see, sometimes Mr. Posey was his name. Yeah, he said those things are coming back, and Mr. Posey, I get the impression he was a bit of an arrogant type. But anyway, he was explaining, the Valpolicella is a wine that you find near Florence, and so on. And so, of course, at that period, whenever we could, we would get Folinari Valpolicella. Then there was another time. That one of the men was from Ireland. I don't know. Once again, I don't know why he was from Ireland. I mean, for what he came. He was Jerry. I don't remember his last name. It was something like Murphy or whatever. It was a very common Irish name. But it was Jerry. And Jerry was probably, let me see, Posey was probably in his late 40s. Jerry, I would say, was in his mid-50s. From Ireland, thick Irish accent, as friendly as the Irish always are. And my dad, somebody had told him buy porter, because that was like the dark beer that we had. So it was probably the closest that we had to Guinness in town, because nobody knew what Guinness was. I mean, we were pretty, I was going to say we were hicks, I suppose you could say. Anyway, but Jerry, he was such a nice man. I remember first impression of the Irish, yeah. And I was talking about pizza in the beginning because the third person was a man that his family had come over. So I guess he was living in another town. I remember he was living in another town for a period anyway, probably kind of a sabbatical or what. And he was Dutch. And Tony Van Dorn, it's funny how the names come back. And he'd come, he'd been swimming with us, and he started talking about something called pizza. And I mean, don't forget, I was like probably between 10 and 14, something like that. And we were all saying, "What is pizza?" We'd never heard about it. And he was a little bit taken back. But there were no restaurants, and the restaurants that we had didn't have pizza. Pizza probably was something you could find, well, certainly something you could find in Montreal. But we were like a 2.5 hour, maybe 3 hour drive away from Montreal. We never heard about pizza. What was pizza? And even our television shows didn't talk about pizza. So he said to my dad, "Well, you guys come over to my place at one point." And he says, "And we'll have pizza." And so we went over, I don't know when, a certain period of time after that. And I remember meeting his wife and family. He had 2 or 3 daughters, maybe a son. but the daughter, everybody was blonde. I mean, he was, well, I don't know what I don't remember his hair color, but the wife and the daughters, they were really blonde. I mean, I had seen blonde kids before, but it was like, wow. And I don't remember. I think it was the daughter's name Antje or something like that. That's probably more of a German name, but it was something like that. And I don't remember very much. They might have been a little bit older than we were. But like I say, very blonde. And we had pizza. It was kind of a deep pan pizza, which in today's world, I said they probably bought it at a supermarket somewhere. But we were like, wow. And it was like a completely new discovery. World food, European food. Not too long ago, we discovered Italian wine. And the guy told us, I remember, he says, and nobody drank wine then, they had beer. But he told my dad, he says, oh, pizza is good with wine, of course, and so on. And my dad, I could see my dad saying, like, oh yes, I could imagine it would be good with Italian wine. And he probably mentioned the wine, the only wine that he knew about. Yeah, memories. It's amusing how memories will come back when you get the right cues, and that's a nice thing. It can go the other way, can't it? I mean, you can have memories that'll be the negative ones because you will get the wrong cues. But when it's a nice cues like that, just having a deep pan pizza brought back a whole bunch of memories, of a childhood which I can only say was one of the best types. It's a childhood that was pretty much like the 1950s, early 1960s, when you could be free and go off and do things, Anyway, that's my Sunday vlog. And yes, I've done other things today. We went to church and so on. But like I say, all of a sudden I just start chatting about this, and yeah, I think I'll finish off my Costa Rican coffee. Yeah. DC signing off. Take care, everybody, and have a good Sunday.